this legacy and this history and uplift these stories that are not just about black Muslims but about the history of Islam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alright, my name is Hawa. I'm currently the vice president of BMI, which is a student club that was founded in 2017. And so the point of BMI is to create a safe space for black Muslims to to vent and to share their experiences without the fear of judgment, without the fear of having like a filter of not offending anybody. And oftentimes when you come from marginalized identities, you need like that support system and you need that space to just talk and to just be you, to just be free, to just be validated and to not have people tell you like, oh, this is all in your head or you're overthinking. So that's one of our goals, and inshallah, other goal is to create events that cater to the larger Muslim community. This is one of them, alhamdulillah. And so inshallah, for the brothers, we have our Black Muslim panel coming up on December 5th, 2019. So if y'all want to put it in your calendars, you know what I'm saying? So it's a safe space for Black Muslims to just share their experiences and to just be vulnerable and to talk about masculinity through the lens of Islam and the modern patriarchal society. We also have our symposium coming up February 29th, 2020. It's from 9 to 5, and it's basically like a yearly thing where we have scholars and residential people from our community come and talk about, various subjects like, like mental health, Islam in West Africa, Islam in America. They just come and talk about their own specialties. We also have people come and recite Quran, do a little poetry, do a little music. And then we also have people come in and, we also have a panel session where us, the Black Muslim members, there's actually like more of us. We all over in the crowd, but we come and we talk about our experiences. We come and talk about, why BMI was founded, our experiences being Black and Muslim in the classrooms, being Black and Muslim in America in general. And so yeah, inshallah, keep that on your radar. More to come.
I feel like Hawa summed it up so perfectly, but one of the things we really try to do here is highlight the Black Muslim experience, because a lot of the times, especially like non-Black Muslims, you are intentional in your actions, and sometimes you can make people feel comfortable. So by highlighting these experiences, we can educate you and others about the history of Islam and the role that Black Muslims play, as well as how you can be a better ally and not just a fashionable ally. So we're going to get started, and first we're just gonna have a beautiful Quran recitation by one of our board members, the Secretary Suraya Mahmoud. So she's gonna come up here and do that.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن آياته أن خلقكم من تراب ثم إذا أنتم بشر تنتشرون. ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة. إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون. ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلفوا ألسنتكم وأولانكم. إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين. صدق الله العظيم.
التكبير. التكبير. gonna translate real quick. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Okay. It is among his signs that he has created you from dust. Then soon you are human beings scattered around. And it is among his signs that he has created for you wives from among yourselves, so that you may find tranquility in them. And he has created love and kindness between you. Surely in this there are signs for people who reflect. And among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the difference of your tongues and colors. Surely in this there are signs for the persons having knowledge. Sadaqallahu. Yeah. So inshallah, Aisha prom will be coming very soon. So inshallah, I hope we all benefit from this event. I'm pleased and honored to present our beloved Sheikh Aisha prom.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad. I want to, first of all, I want to congratulate those of you who came. And I want to congratulate you for a multitude of reasons. SubhanAllah, anytime Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invites us to something, especially as it relates to the realm and the sphere of knowledge, there's opportunity in it, right? It's like a big pot of gold, right? And in it there's some gold, there's some jewels, there's some gems, there's something of great value and great worth. And many times we might think, that pot of gold is not for me, right? Or we may pass it by and say, oh, that's for somebody else. I'm passing by that. But those of you who came, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with the barakah of the inheritance of the Anbiya, of the secrets of what it is we're discussing. Especially those of you who identify as non-black. Because it's easy for us to say, this is not about me, right? This is for somebody else. That's for the BMI. That's for their black folk. When they hold one about Arabs, I'll be present. When they hold one in Urdu, I'll be there. When they hold one in Spanish, I will come. But for you to say, I'm going to be present, even though seemingly on the outward it may have nothing to do with me, says one or two things about you. Either you have enough heart to say, I'm going to show up to be a knowledgeable ally, or you have enough intelligence to recognize that this is also your story. Either one, you in for good. Either side that you fall on, it's khair wa khair. It's a win-win. So I myself am super excited to talk about this. I'm also incredibly nervous. You might say, you, Sister Aisha? Right? Because the topic is so heavy. It's so heavy. It's so it's also so rich. It's one of those things that you're like, Ya Rabbi, please bless me to be able to even to shine a little bit of light. Bless me to be able to speak about this and to give it some justice. Because it is so huge, so wonderful, such a magnificent thing that we're discussing. I'm like, Ya Rabbi, please don't let me mess it up. I can't stand being behind this podium. Is that okay with you? It makes me too far away from you, and I'm not heard. So I need your help, bi'idhnillah, to I'm going to do my best, inshallah. Just give me 1 second. And then, oh, it's up. How do I make it? I can just unplug this? Yeah? Yeah. Put it over here. That's okay? Maybe, maybe not. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammad. Okay, while they're doing that,
while they work out the technical difficulties. Yay! Allahu Akbar. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. That's perfect. Can I put it on the side so I can put the laptop here? Okay. All right. First of all, let's talk about what is the reason for us being here. What is the reason that we actually need to even have a conversation where we're actually singling out Black Sahaba? What is it that causes us to say, I need to shed a light on a specific group of people that were always a part of the prophetic community, that were always a part of our narrative, but somehow we find ourselves in 2019 in a position where I need to actually focus on a specific aspect of that prophetic community. And part of the reason that's become very clear, why do I have to single out that specific aspect of the Prophet ﷺ's community? And it can only be about two things. Number one, they have been forgotten. And they have been forgotten not in a way that their names have been dismissed. No, we know their names. But what happens is that many times they are remembered, but they're remembered inside of a certain framework, right? And so inside of that framework, when I many times when we think about the community of the beloved messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, we pretty much kind of assume, right, that this is like a wash, right? Like we'll say like a very light brown wash, a very, 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 very light brown wash, right? Of all the people generally the same, very similar to what happened when the movie Risala was first released in Arabic and then it became the message in English, that for the most part we saw pretty much everyone looked the same except for one person, right? Everyone looked the same except for Bilal. And the sad thing about it is that's not true. That's not how that went. And even more importantly, what happens is that so this begins an erasure, whether it was deliberate or whether it was out of ignorance. Either way, the problem is the same. And so as a result of it, you either have a people who feel that I have been so there are some very serious implications of that, and one of the first implications of that is that I'm not a part of this story, right? That I'm not a part of this story, and then, so that's one aspect. Those who are Black are feeling like I'm not a part of this story, or you have another group of people who then basically say, you do not have authority to be you cannot speak about this deen, you cannot speak about Allah and His Messenger or the prophetic community or Islam in general with a level of authority, because for the most part you are an invited guest, right? You are an invited guest, and as a result of you being an invited guest, basically you can sit down and learn something. That this deen is something that came to you, right? And so because it later came to you, you were not a part of it from the beginning, then for the most part, the general position is, I need to school you on this, right? That I am the authority, right? That I am the authority, and you are the invited bystander. You are an invited marginalized community, and be happy I let you be a part of it. Now, the challenge with that is we're all damaged from that. All of us at that point suffer from deep sickness and illness as a result of that level of erasure. When that level of erasure occurs, then I, as the Black person, and I'm going to define that in a minute, that I, as the Black person, will then begin to feel as if I need to tiptoe, right? Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barik Sayyidina Muhammad. That's mine? No, okay. Sounded like mine. I was like, Aisha. And it could happen to me, so I'm gonna check my phone. So then what happens is I begin to feel like, number one, either I have to tiptoe, right, around the Muslim community because I am an invited guest inside of the Islamic space, or I just need to simply form my own masjid and I'm not, I can only be, we can only relate to each other because for the most part, I'm not accepted in other spaces, right? And then on the other side, on the non-black side of it, what it does is say, again, you're an invited guest. If you can come for Black History Month. You can come talk about Malcolm or Muhammad Ali. You want to talk about Bilal, you can talk about Bilal. But as a result of that, we're all deficient. And then we all become complicit in the erasure, and we all become complicit in the prejudice and the racism that comes as a result of all of that. So the result of anti-blackness in the world, and anti-blackness just by nature, right? By the nature of Muslims being human beings, is that we are going to also have some of the same diseases that exist outside of the Muslim community. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah does not make you immune from colonialism or the ideas of white supremacy. Right? And so, as a result, then we all need healing from this. Right? We all need healing. And the only way for us to be able to correct that is we have to re-educate our minds. Okay? So, blackness as a race, that by, oh, Lord have mercy. So let's be clear about one particular thing. We will not cover all of this tonight, right? So I think the BMI has already promised that this will be a series, right? That it will be a series because we won't be able to solve all of colonialism, neo-colonialism, anti-blackness, and inside the Muslim community, and all of the Black Sahaba inside of an hour and a half. It's just too rich for all of that. So what we're going to do tonight, inshallah, is we're just going to at least be able to introduce a portion of the topic, and for us to begin to wrap our minds, our heart, and our souls around the healing that's necessary, right? And again, we have all been affected. So it wasn't until, and I want to say, when we're talking about blackness as a race, this is a fairly new concept, right? It's a fairly new concept to talk about blackness as a race. And the reason it became, when was this introduced when was blackness introduced as a race, was basically around actually several years into the implementation of the what I want to call the mid-Atlantic slave trade. That in order to say, okay, who can we subjugate, right? Who can we usurp and force free labor from, and who will we not usurp free labor from? Who can be slaves and who can be indentured servants? And so what happens is that once we begin to conflate blackness, and I'm being real fast tonight, right? Because we don't have time to, this will be a course in the university, right? We don't have time to really go through all of what it means about the development of what we call blackness as a race. So for those of you who see this video later, please understand I'm not that dense that I think we could just kind of conflate it all into, into 3 or 4 sentences. But for the sake of time in the introduction tonight, and for us to be able to get to the topic that we're discussing. So in the implementation of race for the sake of labor, a narrative begins to be told. And that narrative begins to place value on a particular race. It begins to say, these people are valuable, these people are less valuable, or should I say these people are valuable for this purpose. Almost to the point that then it becomes also an intellectual intellectual ability and intellectual traits are then, developed into a very pseudoscience, right, around it. And so then what happens is they begin to say, okay, well, these are Caucasians, right? And these are Mongoloids, and these are Negroids, right? And Negroids have this particular skull structure, and this particular skull structure even lends itself to a certain level of intelligence or a certain proclivity toward academia or not, or a certain proclivity toward work, right? Certain proclivity toward free labor, basically creating this, and and the Caucasian race, this being the superior one, they are the most intellectual one, they have, blah, 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 blah. And that begins to tell a narrative. Now, I wish that somehow this was able to be only this idea was only contained inside of America, right? But the thing about America and its wonderful propaganda, or should I say it's a wonderful PR, it's a great PR machine, it began to spread this idea far and wide. And it needed to be able to spread this idea as well as fan the flame of colorism that did exist inside of other nations and tribes and civilizations. You're following me? So if I can fan that flame, I can now say this is not just a color issue, that this is a race issue, right? That these people were created a certain way. You're following me? Now I say all of that to say is to say that blackness transcends what we would call nations and tribes. This is why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the verse that she read, that in, one of the signs of Allah is your color, right? So then when we talk about blackness, first we have to, what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us about blackness? So this actually, just as in everything in this dunya, it has an internal aspect and it has an external aspect, right? So from an external aspect, just this isn't hard, but for some reason we forget it, that from an external aspect, each color has a meaning, right? Each color has a meaning. And so blackness, one of the meanings of blackness is about mastery, right? If you become a master of the law, you get a what? You get a black robe. If you become a master at martial arts, you get a what? You get a black belt. And so forth and so forth, so on. That this was something that was known amongst human beings, that part of the definition of the external meaning from a dunya perspective of blackness, one of the meanings is mastery, as well as mystery, as well as elegance. If you're going to the most elegant of events, what color suit you gonna wear? Black. What kind of dress you gonna wear?
Black.
You gonna wear a black, this is a what kind of tie affair?
Tie.
This is a black tie affair, which means that this is an affair of elegance. It's an opportunity where our richer selves come out, right? You're not coming in when you wear your black tie, you ain't coming raggedy. You're not coming with you're not wearing your black jeans, right? You're not wearing your black Converse. No, unless you Russell Simmons or something. But that's another matter. Sorry, I digress. Right? What you're coming with is you're going to wear your wealthiest of clothes. Right? You're going to wear your richest of clothes. And so from an external meaning, this is actually some of the origins of that, right? Now, everything has its flip side. I'm not here for that tonight. Now, on the other side, on the spiritual level, what is the origin of blackness, right? So the origin of blackness is actually black light. And so black light is the light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he created the universe, everything took on a particular light or a particular quality, right? And so the particular quality, I don't have time to go through all of it tonight, but one of the qualities of black light is its ability to, it absorbs everything. And this is very important as we begin to understand how blackness plays out in our society, right? Is that it is the light that absorbs everything and then also reflects that back. So naturally, by there is a and someone begins to manipulate our feelings and manipulate what we just know on a basic level, that when you see it, when you see blackness, when it's tall, when it's big, when it's wide, there's a certain feeling of power that you feel like, whoa, right? Which is why even, subhanAllah, this has been done, studies have been done in diversity and inclusion classes, when they'll show a picture, right? Black man or a woman with all her hair like boof, right? What do you feel? Power, anger, right? You just start to feel some level of intimidation. And part of this is because of the absorption power, right? And then reflecting it back. The other thing about black light, it is the light by which one begins to see oneself, right? Within black light, one is able to see their own internal selves. It's the light of self-actualization. Now, why is this important? Because what happens is that when we are faced with blackness, right, our true selves show up. Right? When we are faced with blackness, even on the physical level, what we really feel, whether we like it or not, begins to show up. We begin to acknowledge, I'm feeling some type of way, even if only internally, right? I'm feeling uncomfortable. Not sure why I'm uncomfortable. Let me evaluate why am I uncomfortable. I'm starting to feel, or if you're the opposite, if you are identifying with that, there's a certain level of right? There's a certain level of like, rah, I don't know, internal like yes that you begin to feel, depending on where you are on the spectrum, right? In that moment, depending on where you are in proximity to that, right? But in reality, what comes out is we're able to experience our true selves. We're actually, when blackness is introduced into the conversation, when blackness is introduced into the society, we all begin to find out who we really are, right? And that's just what it does for us, right? It begins for us to it shines a reflection back, right? Shines a reflection just right back on ourselves for us to be able to see ourselves in our true light and true understanding. It is also, I won't go too far in terms of understanding why it is the color by which everyone's shadow is. It is that, again, that reflection. It is that reflection by which we all are forced to acknowledge certain aspects of ourselves. And again, each color has its meaning and its purpose. But one of the meanings and the purpose as it relates to blackness is for us is that self-reflection, and as a result, that self-actualization. And so we see this consistently throughout races, throughout time, that it's when we are addressed with that, we have to kind of face it. Now, I want to take a moment and then go into, before we can get into the Sahaba of Rasulullah, and he said, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. I'm moving fast. And I want to make sure that okay, there we go. Uh-oh. Okay, stop acting funky. Okay. So we all know, I hope I don't have to, go through this, that we are all created from, right? That you were created from one essence. Now, again, remember we talked about that one essence being that essence by which that one essence has to have all included, right? All included. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes when the messenger of Allah alayhi salatu, when Allah created, and then the prophet alayhi salatu wasalam describes our father Adam, which from udma, right, which is blackness, right? So this is why, because then from that you can extract other colors, right? You can extract other from that because it is the one that absorbs all. I want you just on your own to spend quite a bit of time reflecting on the meaning of that, what that absorption of everything is. Because when we look at the people who endure, right, the level of who, if we were to talk about levels of injustice, right, talk about oppression, we were talking about level of attention, that absorption, there is reason for that, for us to reflect on. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all. Again, we know that we're created from one. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now this is talking about black light, is in the spiritual realm. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many times allows things, in most cases, allows that which is in the spiritual realm to then be reflected, or should I say represented in one form or another in the physical realm, right? This happens on several levels. So getting back to the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, learn from your lineage that which will connect you with your family heritage. We know that, subhanal khaliq, one of the maqasid al-sharia, one of the aims of the sharia, of course, is the preservation of lineage, right? The preservation of lineage, the preservation of heritage. The interesting thing about that is most of us are content with that to a certain point, right? We're content with that as long as I get to maintain my Iroquois title, or as long as I get to maintain my, my Puerto Rican title, or I get to maintain my Pakistani, or my Afghan, or my Bengali, or my Arab, or my Syrian, or my Lebanese, or Egyptian, or whatever it is. We're content with it to that point. But the portion of it that says, keep going back till you find your common ancestors, right? That part, we know that Adam was created. We know that he was created from black mud. But for some reason, we're uncomfortable with that. So let me just go back to right here. Let me just stop at the point that I'm comfortable with, right? The point that makes me feel good about myself, or at least gives me some delineation. But it's important to that preservation of the entirety of our lineage is actually the preservation of our common lineage, right? It is the preservation of where we all intersect. It's the preservation of where we come together and we can recognize our own humanity and connectedness to each other. All right. So, the reason, again, why it's important for us to trace that lineage is because it's the process of undoing the oppression that one feels, and it's the process of undoing the concept of inferiority and superiority. That if we can continue to go back and acknowledge Adam in his essence, because why? If I acknowledge Adam's blackness, I have no problem dealing with brown folk. If I can accept the blackness, then brown folk, then red folk, then I don't like these whatever, but then it's easy for me. Then anyone underneath, that's easy. You ever notice that, right? If I can get to if I can fully embrace, right, all the blackness, in its bold, full state, and love it, just feel that it is a part of me, then that would literally undo any form of oppression from the perspective of race and color. All of it would just crumble. It is in terms of our connectedness, our benefit from our our sicknesses as a result of white supremacy, if we could get over anti-blackness to the point of love and acceptance, it would be the end of it. And so this conversation, as a result, becomes necessary for all of our individual and collective healing. Right? Allahumma salli wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. All right. So, in addition to, it's so important that we understand that blackness as a phenotype was not mentioned in 1400 Arabia, 1400 years ago. This wasn't mentioned then. This was not the means by which this was discussed. And I'll begin to tell you why. Because when someone at that particular time, what's more important is not only am I Arab, I'm from this particular tribe, I'm from this particular clan, I'm from this particular tribe, I'm from this particular clan, I'm from this particular family. That actually took precedence over this larger concept. Do you following me? And so again, talking about blackness, it did not exist from a racial standpoint until we have the great America, who then, sells us on this concept and then begins to sell it like wholesale to the rest of the world. And we won't talk about the dollars and cents that are connected to that. Yeah, we won't talk about the dollars and cents that are connected to that. So I want to take us just really quickly why it's important. So there's one of our great teachers of Timbuktu. He says the lack of knowledge of self is so detrimental to all of us. Now, yes, I'm talking to the black folk in the room and I'm talking to the non-black folk in the room, because if we can acknowledge the origin of self, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ, if we can acknowledge that, again, all of the healing would begin. Whoever does not inform his children of his grandparents has destroyed his child, marred his descendants, and injured his offspring until the day he dies. If we don't tell our children that Adam was created from black mud, you are actually setting up, you are actually setting up some things from the beginning. From the beginning. We're pretty much saying, oh, Lord, have mercy. We begin to adopt other thoughts, other erroneous ideas about the curse of Ham and all other kind of weak foolishness. Okay, whoever does not make use of his ancestry has muddled his reason. Whoever is unconcerned with his lineage has lost his mind. Whoever neglects his origin, his stupidity has become critical. Whoever is unaware of his ancestry, his incompetence has become immense. Whoever is ignorant of his roots, his intellect has vanished. Whoever does not know his place of origin, his honor has collapsed. Now, this is about knowledge. What about acceptance? What about acceptance, comfortability, and the spreading of that? So, now going to the next. Bismillah. I have to, of course, there's a historical factor, a linguistic factor, and a psychological factor that is connected to us having this historical consciousness, right? And it's because when we get to the point that we only, I'll give you a prime example. We're in the university, so it's key to, it's key and important for us to recognize. When we get to the point, I was recently traveling through West Africa, and as I was traveling, so, one of the things that became very apparent was about, I've known this, but to see it, that in our institutions of knowledge, the methodology for which we promote knowledge is either in English or in French.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Which then says the languages that you speak do not have the same psychological or academic intelligentsia. And we all have bought into that concept to one degree or another. That we have not, you have not, you know, until you can, you know, get a certain degree in this country or in other certain, you know, Oxford, this, da, 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 and what we've done with that, you're not, you know, you haven't really arrived. You're not, until you have that stamp, you haven't really reached there. We all have to just really think about, you know, what we have considered arrived and backwards in terms of its psychological effects on all of us and how even our approach to knowledge, and who we deem intelligent and who we deem unintelligent. Okay, I need to, the Prophet ﷺ said the Habashis are famous people whose lineage goes back to Ham ibn Nuh. This is specifically the Habashis. They constitute the majority of humanity, and their land is the largest of lands. This is recorded by Imam Nawawi, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ said, the Khalifat is from the Quraysh, judiciary is from the Ansar, and the invitation is from the blacks, by Bukhari wa Tarikh al-Kabir. I want us to look at, this is the moment, inshallah, where I want us to look at what is it that Bilal ibn Rabah, what is it that he did exactly? Who was he exactly? Because for the most part, when we think of Bilal, we call him the Abyssinian slave. But we need to look at is what Bilal was given was in prophetic understanding. None of this is just like, oh yeah, you've been given a job and that's it. We have to go back to who was the one who was originally given the responsibility of the call. Who knows? Who was the one originally given the responsibility to call people? Who knows? Somebody knows. Come on, we all walk in their footsteps when we go to Hajj. Ibrahim, right? Ibrahim alayhi salam. So the Prophet Ibrahim is the one that originally stands on the mountain, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the call, right? Gives him the responsibility to make the call, right? Which is literally like the call to faith, the call to prayer, the call to worship. And Ibrahim initially says, Ya Allah, there's nobody here, right? And he says, look, I didn't ask you about the results. I just asked you to fulfill this particular job or the responsibility that you've given. You make the call, I will bring the people. Why is this important? Is because what Bilal is given is not the call. Bilal is not given the adhan. He is given the inheritance of Prophet Ibrahim. Right? This is what he's given. Which is why it's so significant that when we talk about the Kaaba, right? Who's responsible for building the Kaaba? Right? Prophet Ibrahim or Ismail. Which is why that he could have just said, go stand upon that hill, Ya Bilal. He could have said, Ya Bilal, stand from here and call the people because that's where they are. He said, no, I'm going to put your feet on top of the Kaaba, and this is where you're going to give the call. Why are you standing on top of the Kaaba, Ya Bilal? Because this is an elevated position, and you're going to stand upon the rock that your father Ibrahim established. So this is a prophetic inheritance that he's receiving. There is a secret that Bilal is given. And part of the reason that he's given, when we look at the early Sahaba, what happens is that it was actually those who were responsible, those who were forced into slavery. And I use that term, I want you to hear me clearly. Those who were forced into slavery, not that they were born slaves, Not that they had some proclivity towards slave labor, but they were actually, we're talking about mothers and fathers and children and farmers and architects and engineers, and we're talking about educators, and who were then kidnapped and sold into slavery. And so it's important, and I want us to be very clear about something. I am not saying that slave is something that should be, that we should then feel a certain level of disdain or hurt feelings or shame about. Why? Why am I am not afraid to be ashamed of being the daughter or the granddaughters of slaves. Those who enslave need to be ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That's not something they did out of their own control. Those who actually did the evil were not the slaves. So it's amazing how we have allowed that narrative to flip the script into the people who are the victims are the ones who are inferior as opposed to the ones who did the victimizing. Right? Very similar to the statement of Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Al-Hajj Malik Omowale Shabazz, who said that if you're not careful, right, the media will have you hating the people who are the oppressed and loving the ones who are doing the oppressing. And so when we look at Bilal, we all kind of cringe, right? Like, oh, Bilal, the slave, right? No, this is the inheritor of Ibrahim. This is the one who actually, because what happens is that the Prophet, how did the Prophet ﷺ get to know Bilal? How did he get to know Bilal? It wasn't just somebody came to him and said, I know this man who's interested. No, what happens is that when the Prophet ﷺ used to meditate in the cave, Bilal was the one, the slaves of that time used to have to get up very early in the morning, right? We used to call it, our grandparents used to say, from can't see morning to can't see night. And so they used to have to get up very early in the morning to get the milk and to prepare the food and a number of things. So he used to be up extremely early in the morning, not too far actually from the cave of Hira. And so when the Prophet ﷺ came down from the cave of Hira with the message, Bilal was there and said, basically, I know you've seen something special. This wasn't like an overwhelming concept to Bilal, which is why he's one of the early and of the first believers, which is why he was given the inheritance of Prophet Ibrahim, because he was already up early. So he had that quality already for being up early, which is why he was given that inheritance to call people for Fajr. This was not because he had a beautiful singing voice. Right? Oh. Oh, Lord, have mercy. If we understood the slave narrative inside of that, right? It wasn't because he had the most beautiful singing voice that he was given the call to prayer. That was not what that was about. This was about his early morning while people were sleeping level of spirituality, that he was given this particular inheritance, and then said, we are going to elevate him. And I'll tell more about Bilal in a moment. I'm going to put Bilal to the side, our beloved Bilal. May Allah Ta'ala forever be pleased with him, because there's some deep spiritual lessons that are present in Bilal. But we cannot talk about Bilal unless we talk about Ibrahim. And that's why I say, before we get to the Sahaba, we must not, it's very similar to something we do in America, where we actually talk about Black history post-slavery. As if somehow Black people just appeared, right? As if their history began as an afterthought or an appendage or a page in the story of white colonists. Right? as opposed to, I think they were a rich people of civilization. This is part, they didn't steal them because they were a lazy people. They didn't steal them because they weren't a people who had already established something. They stole them because of what they saw them building already. Right? So what you have, what you have built, what you have established already, I might not necessarily have the ability to do that myself. So I'm going to come steal you and force you to do it for me. That's different than starting a story, a narrative, you know, like out of 100 pages, you start telling the story on page 95. You have to tell the story before that. And the story of blackness begins in the Quran. Majority of the Quran takes place where? Rome? China? China 4,000. No? How about Sydney, Australia? No? Where's the story of Musa happen? Just tell me the continent.
Africa.
I want you to say it. The story of Yaqub and Yusuf happens where? In Africa. The story of Egypt is not a continent, darlings. I want you to tell me the continent. What continent does it happen on? And I tell you that because we like to carve out Egypt, right? And make Egypt a part of the Middle East, which is a whole nother line. The east of what? Who said the east of who? Oh man, if y'all understood the level of Eurocentrism that we have adopted. The Middle East of what? Okay, so we're going to keep it on the continent because we like to carve out Egypt and be like, no, Egypt is ours. And there's a reason for that. Idris happens where? Huh? Well, please say it loud.
Africa.
Happens in Africa. So we have the story of, and Ibrahim and the story of Hajar happens where?
Africa.
And okay, so we have Yaqub, Yusuf, Idris, Musa. Right? The story of Hajar. All of that happens in Africa. Majority of the Quran takes place in Africa. Why? Allah is saying, you trying to forget something. But there's a secret in it for your own individual and collective healing. I want you to not forget. We love to, I don't know why we like to Ibrahim was in Mesopotamia. I think we need to revisit that walk, that journey that he was in, because majority of the story that talks about it, right, is in Africa. And then he doesn't leave Africa until he gets an African woman. And then that African woman does what? She becomes the center and the starter of the Meccan civilization. Hajar is the daughter of the African pharaoh, a good one, right? Who releases Sarah, right? And is like, whoa, you're praying, something happens to me. I'm not going through the whole story, right? I wanted you prayed. Wow, I fall into fits and I fall into a seizure. He then says, for the sake of goodness between you and I free you, and I'm going to give you my daughter to help you, right? This is my gift to you. Like, that's how I'm going to honor you. I'm going to give you my own daughter. Hajar was the daughter of a pharaoh, was the daughter of a king, who then became the wife of Ibrahim, who then, when Ibrahim took her to Mecca, did he stay? Whose faith did she say? Basically, if Allah has put me in this place, has to be Allah. Allah will take care of me, right? Allah is sufficient for me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to build the entire Meccan civilization around this woman, this black Egyptian woman by the name of Hajar. Even so, that's not a small thing. Oh, Lord, I wish y'all understood. This is not a small thing. So much to the point, it's so serious that where he leaves her by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know the well of Zamzam pops up. When this is the well of Zamzam is pretty much like the fruit of her labor. This is the gift Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives her, and basically in order to establish this civilization because of her yaqeen, because of her tawakkul, because of her certainty and her reliance and her trust upon Allah, the well of Zamzam comes about. When the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam goes to Isra and Mi'raj, that night before he goes into the journey, they open up his chest, and different from when he was a child and they took something out of his heart, this time they pour something inside and wash his heart. What is it? Zamzam. The fruit of the labor of our mother Hajar. Yaqub, the father of Yusuf, what we know is that they actually migrate, and you can find this in several textbooks. You can find this. What happens is that Yaqub migrates from a more central area of Africa into Egypt. They come into Egypt. You're familiar with this, right? They migrate into Egypt. So they migrate into Egypt from a more centralized area in Africa. And it's so interesting. You remember when Imam Fode was here? Now, I don't know if I explained this to you, but Imam Fode speaks a language called Jahenke. And Jahenke is actually a language that is very, now he is from a region in Senegambia that's all the way West Africa. The Jahenke, I told you that he's currently translating the Quran in Metanatu, which is the ancient Egyptian language that we have hieroglyphics, right? When he was translating this, he says it's an easy translation for us because the origin of the language is the same. Anybody like to tell me how you got Metanatu, the same language as the Jahenke in West Africa? You have to study the lineage of Prophet Idris for that one. So, just to go through really quickly, because for the sake of time, and I want us to have opportunity to do Q&A. Oh, okay, there we go. Yes, maybe no. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ says, hold on to the blacks because the 3 persons of them are from the masters of the people of Jannah. Luqman the wise, oh, I forgot to tell you that one too. Luqman the wise, of course, and Najasi, and Bilal, the call to prayer. This is in one of the texts of Ibn Kathir. I want to, it's so interesting because Luqman is called, majority of the scholars are under the understanding, the perception that Luqman was not a prophet, right? That he's just known as a wise and noble man. So it's very interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give him this centralized position inside of the Quran, right? And again, in the Quran is the healing for all of this. It's so important because as we are even studying this understanding about race relations or blackness or recognizing anti-blackness, it's not necessarily so that you have to go outside of it to another academia or another philosophy or another ism. If we just actually study the Quran with an open eye, we would be able to see the healing, subhanAllah, right there inside of our deen. Right there in our face. But this is what happens is that when we have been preconditioned, when we have been trained, when anti-blackness has been an issue from the very beginning, right? When we won't discuss Adam, when we say Adam was, he was created from dirt. What kind of dirt? What color dirt? Right? Udma. Right? That he's created. So this is not something that we teach our children. Right? So then we can remove the fear and the anxiety around blackness from early on. If we're just the same way we're teaching our children about the beauty of the Prophet ﷺ when we describe him as white. Which, by the way, that's not what that meant. That did not mean white in terms of European white. The way they described Romans were actually a yellowish color. So when they're describing the Prophet ﷺ as white, what they're talking about is a very light brown skin. Because that, as we all know, for those of you who are from different countries, depending on where you are in the world, whiteness has a different connotation. It doesn't mean the same. Okay. I want to go to, now we'll get into some of the Sahaba of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam. Now that at least we've covered some aspect of that, we don't begin just with the Sahaba of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us revelation about. So those of you who are like, well, I don't know, those are some Sahaba, I'm not really sure that's important or significant, then know that it's listed in the Quran. Then know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent revelation from the seven heavens, and it is a means of our healing from us to extract these lessons from the Quran, right? A healing for the mind, the body, and the soul. So I want to tell you about Allahumma salli wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad. When the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam was brought into this world, he was first received by a woman by the name of Thuwayba. And Thuwayba was actually, she became the wet nurse of the Prophet ﷺ. She was actually the first wet nurse. She was the first woman. So the first hands to receive the Prophet ﷺ into the world were the hands of a black woman. The second hands to touch him were Ayman, who was also who was present during that time. She then cleaned him up, make sure he was okay, passed him on to Amina, the mother of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam. After that she nursed him, it was then Thuwayba who then nursed the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. This is very important because whatever, and I know that this is circulated in our communities, this concept of the curse of Ham, that blackness is a curse. Trust me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not allow his beloved, the khuluqul azim, to be brought into the world by the hands of black women, then nursed. And by the way, you know that nurse, the reason why someone becomes related to someone else, right, from the milk is because this milk was originally a part of her blood. Right? This was blood then turned into milk that gives. So the Prophet ﷺ, what am I telling you? The Prophet ﷺ had black blood in his body. That's what I'm telling you. From the beginning. Jump. External, internal. So then, khalas, he's nursed by his mother. We know that he's then given to Halima. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you Halima was a black woman. This is not one of those classes like everybody was black. No, that's not what I'm saying. Right? Everybody was black. The whole world was black. We're all black. That's not what I'm saying. And so then, subhanAllah, after he's given back from Halima, when he returns back with his mother at a young age, he goes to his mother, takes him to Medina, to Yathrib. He there learns to swim. He plays with his cousins. On the way, who was accompanying his mother Amina on that trip is Ayman or Baraka. Her name is Baraka. She was also Abyssinian. She was Ethiopian. So Ayman accompanies him. The beloved Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, his mother passes away. And when his mother passes away, one of the last few things that are recorded from his mother is that he says to Ayman, he says to Baraka, take him as your son, right? Meaning, take care of him, O Baraka, right? To the point that the Prophet ﷺ said, she was the mother after my mother, right? He used to say, Ya Ayman, Ya Ummi, right? Ya Ayman, Ya Ummi. This is something the Prophet ﷺ used to say about Baraka. And so it's also known is that when his mother passed away, it's Baraka who actually digs the grave of his mother with her own hands. And it is in the hand of Baraka, Ayman, that she walks the beloved orphan back from Abwa into Mecca, hand in hand, and then gives him to his uncle. And so Abu Talib, And when he's with Abu Talib, he actually doesn't stay the entire time. It's known that Baraka would actually take him back. She would take care of him pretty much, and then like at night and feed him and make sure that he was well taken care of, and then she would turn him back to the home of Abu Talib with Fatima bin Asad. But this was who's taking care of him on a regular basis. It's Baraka, right? It's Baraka. And so interestingly enough, I want to, in that particular home where he's staying in the home of Abu Talib. His cousin, Ali ibn Abi Talib, as we know, the great Ali, may Allah Ta'ala continue to ennoble his face and raise his rank and have peace upon him, is that, and why we say have peace upon him, we say, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala Ali. Okay, thank you. So, may Allah's peace be upon our, of Ali ibn Abi Talib, that subhanAllah, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he is actually described, Ali ibn Abi Talib is actually described as being very dark-skinned, right? He's actually, when he gets older, he's described as being dark-skinned and kind of, losing his hair on the top, but we won't get into that. But the point is that he's described as very dark-skinned. Why is this important to know? Because remember, we talked about that blackness as a race doesn't happen until later, right? So understanding how blackness is received in this particular concept is not only upon the basis of color, it's also about who do you belong to, right? What tribe, what clan, what family do you belong to? Because we have the same situation with Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, that Abu Dhar al-Ghifari is the famous companion who has this altercation with Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where he steps on his foot, and then Abu Dhar al-Ghifari says to Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says to him, oh, you son of a black woman, right? Now, the interesting thing about Abu Dhar al-Ghifari is that he himself is described as being very dark-skinned, right? So why is he saying to Bilal, oh, you son of a black woman? Because what he's saying is, it's this internalized racism. Now I'm talking to my focal color for a minute. This is internalized racism, where it's basically, I might be one shade lighter than you, but what I'm saying is that you're not from us. What I'm saying is you're not like us, right? So this is just, everybody else close your ears for a moment. This is the sum of, but this is also the result of internalized, we have internalized Islamophobia, internalized racism, right? When certain groups of people, right? When the Somalis feel like, I'm close to, right? I'm close to Arabia. Or the Sudanese say, I'm not African, I'm Arab. Y'all better stop playing. Right? Because Arab is not a race any more than being Latino is a race.
Thank you.
Right? Because you speak Spanish, which also means, by the way, if you're in Mexico and you speak Spanish, that's called colonization.
That's right.
But we're not on that right now, sorry. That's another class I know. You from Puerto Rico, you speak Spanish,
Yeah.
talking about you Spanish.
No, you're not.
No.
You would drop there.
Right. But see, this is internalized colonization, right? I'm Spanish. Man, stop playing with me. So I'm not, so the Sudanese, right? I'm not African, I'm Arab.
You black. Yeah.
This is the moment I'd be like, okay, you African Arab. Call it what you want. You a black Arab. Call it what you want.
That's right.
Right? But the issue of blackness, and I'll prove it to you. Let us both get in the car. Okay, no, we're gonna. Anyway, I digress. The point is, though, someone says, right, or you from Mauritania. My skin is a little bit lighter than yours, so I say to those from West Africa who are darker, I can treat you different because I might be one shade lighter, but I'm not from you. You're not from us. You're different. This is all internalized colorism, all internalized racism. This is what's happening between Abu Dhar al-Ghifari and Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari is a couple shades lighter, probably like one shade lighter, right? Than Bilal, and he's like, oh, you son of a black woman. Now, what he's really saying is that Bilal's mother is from Abyssinia. You're not from the Arabian Peninsula. His father was from the Arabian Peninsula. right? So what he's saying is that the issue is, it's kind of like this concept, basically, Obama can't be white because his father is black. One drop of black, get back. Okay? That's it, right? You crossed out. That's fine. We can claim you. We absorb you. Yes. Right? So, but the point is that in this is what's happening between Abu Dhar Ghafari and Bilal. They're both dark skinned, right? Both suffering the same colorism issue. They're both under this veil of inferiority, superiority based upon color. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal us from this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal us completely from this. But he's also known as being very dark skinned. I think in terms of what we promised that we would discuss today, so I'm going to close out on Bilal. Jazakumullah khairan. I'm going to close out on Bilal where I said I would pick up back from him. Bilal being the one who inherits from Prophet Ibrahim, which is why he's given the call to people, which is a very high rank with people, right? But even something more important about Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhum is that he holds what's called a position or a spiritual station at what's called akhfa. And this spiritual station about blackness is the ability that this spiritual station, that when the heart is considered to reach the station of akhfa, that is blackness, it is considered the station to be annihilated in front of Allah. That basically one allows all of the aspects of themselves to no longer matter, which is why in the moment of that of absolute oppression, there is multiple oppression that's happening to Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Yes, he has been subjugated into slavery, and then there is this rock that's being forced upon his chest, so that, basically that the force of that boulder upon his chest, he's not able to breathe. But in addition to the hot Arabian sand is literally burning his back, right? And so when they put him in the sun, it wasn't just about on top of him the heat that he's feeling or the oppression that he's feeling from this boulder. It's also to push him into the sand of burning on his back. But subhanallah, what happens in that moment of being completely, being not just oppressed, but being completely, just defamed and humiliated, is in that moment, he is unconcerned with his own humiliation, and he cries out, Ahadu Ahad, Ahadu Ahad, Ahadu Ahad. And this is one of the highest spiritual stations to obtain. To be completely annihilated in the acknowledgement in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because what does Allah say? Allahu wahid, He is one. But to recognize that He is one and alone. That Allahu al-haq, that Allah is the ultimate reality. In that moment, that's what Bilal recognizes, that it's not this slave master or the boulder or the sand or the sun. It is Ahadu Ahad, Ahadu Ahad. And so this spiritual station of complete annihilation in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah says to us, Qul hu Allahu ahad. And so his ability to recognize this speaks a lot about the spiritual station of Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, which is why it is his voice that carries out. And the Prophet ﷺ is unconcerned with his tongue. There are other companions who say, oh Bilal, like, don't give it to Bilal, like his Arabic is horrible, right? He doesn't say ashhadu ala ilaha, he says ashhadu, right? His Arabic is not perfect. And the Prophet ﷺ said, do you honestly think that's what I'm concerned about? Right? That he has been chosen by Allah of a special gift. And this special spiritual gift that he ascends to also becomes the reason why, or part of the reason why, during the time of the first hijrah, in order for the true healing to begin, right? In order for the liberation process of the Muslims to be had, in order for true liberation to be actualized, first you're going to pass by Abyssinia. First you're going to go through the land of the blacks. First you're going to uproot from your consciousness the belief that they are an uncivilized people. First you're going to uproot from your consciousness that they are meant, they have a proclivity towards slavery, or they should be enslaved, or a proclivity towards labor. Now you're going to seek refuge in their king, who becomes one of the masters of Jannah. Now you're going to submit and seek refuge and comfort and protection from their king. Now you're going to ask mercy for them, and that in and of itself is an atonement. Is an atonement. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barik sayyidina Muhammad. And it is the beginning of the healing process, because they have to go through Abyssinia in order to be granted entrance into Medina, where they will receive another healing. But this healing is the first process in the concept of true liberation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the healing that we need, that we could truly have liberation, that we could be raised to the station of self-annihilation and the realization of ahadiyya.
Amen.
Jazakumullah khairan. Any questions? So sweet.
I can listen to you all day, all night.
Any questions?
We're talking about the story between Abu Dhar and Bilal. We translate it as you, the son of a black woman. How does that, I guess, work, or how does that connect to how we understand blackness in America today? In terms of it being a construct here, was the anti-blackness that existed in that society of a similar nature, related to skin color and darkness, and roots in a certain part of the world? Or would you say it is kind of a different nature? Or is it
I mean, what I'm saying is that blackness transcends even what we would consider ethnicity. And that it transcends, obviously, tribe and nation and language, right? And so, in this concept, looking at blackness from a perspective of, like, if one of your parents, right, and from the perspective of lineage, that if one of your parents, for the most part, we look at blackness today, is that if you have a parent that is of African descent, is of African origin, then we say you are black, you know, right? That you are black in nature. But in reality, we all have a parent that descended from Africa. So we have to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, where are we drawing the lines? Like, you know, I can say we are all black, but that's not true. So it would be in terms of if we're looking at our most remote ancestor, but if we're looking at our origins of more recent lineage, right? So the origins of more recent lineage. We cannot necessarily say that we define that, for example, Abu Dhar al-Ghafari saying that, because in the statement of Abu Dhar al-Ghafari, there are actually two insults in his mind. The insult is when you say you son of a black woman, this is also, it's about race and gender, and the intersection of those. That you're not even, you know, if you're the son of a black man, we might give you a little bit more status, right? And so, you know, he's in saying that, you know, you son of a black woman is like a double insult to put him down. I say that, I go back to the statement about us being black in terms of our origin of Adam, but that is not our most recent deposit. And so looking at that is important, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lists our colors and our languages, our tongues, as a sign from Allah, by which we're able to know ourselves and know each other. Right? And so there is lesson to be learned from each other in this, from an external and an internal angle, from an academic, an intellectual, as well as a spiritual lesson. So I think I'm most, I'm not necessarily sure that it fully relates, and anybody can comment on this. That in terms of that direct correlation, but for the most part, we have that same belief in America, that if your mother is black, you're black. I mean, societal, that's how we see it. Yeah, that if your mother is black, in our minds, you're black.
Earlier when you were saying the different meanings of split, I didn't get a chance to write them all down. Could you just repeat them?
So some of the, in terms of mastery, elegance, self-mastery specifically, mystery, power, uncompromising, resistance. That's another one of the meanings. Resistance. From the perspective when we're looking at it from black light, this is about the absorption and the reflection back of that, right? And annihilation.
I had a question about black light. Does everyone will have the capacity to possess black light, or is it like a specific thing that has to be channeled?
That's a really good question. So he asked, does everyone have the ability to possess, does everyone possess black light, or is it something that you have to channel? So we are all created from a particular light. And so blackness is from the light, is from black light. That what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He each created us is from something. And one of the things that in terms of black people, they were created from black light. And so whether or not it's something you have the ability to channel, my female self wants to say yes, that we all have the ability to channel that. And when I say my female self, my inclusive, right, pull, but I need to check with my teachers. But I need to ask before I say 100% yes. Any other questions? Yes.
So there's something about Bilal when Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him, heard his footsteps in Jannah. Like, can you elaborate on that a little bit? I always love that story.
You're saying some serious stuff over there. And so this is an indication, the full narration of that, of the Prophet ﷺ saying that he heard the footsteps of Bilal in ahead of him in Jannah. Later on, he asked him, what do you do? And this was about that he said that before, this is huge actually for a multitude of reasons, is that Bilal takes the initiative that every time he makes wudu, he then prays 2 raka'ats, right? This is huge because this is not something the Prophet ﷺ specifically told him to do, right? This is something that he, in his own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would, in that process, basically felt the inclination towards making wudu. I mean, I can't say any more about it than the Prophet ﷺ said about it, other than he heard his footsteps ahead of him in Jannah. And so what we understand is that this is an indication of his rank. That's the first thing we understand, that this is a great indication of his rank, that because basically for this to come as a dream to the Prophet ﷺ, this is revelation to the Prophet ﷺ. And so for him to see that, that's huge. It also talks about his, his own personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That then that becomes something that becomes implemented, and something the Prophet ﷺ, after realizing that Bilal did it, it becomes something he then tells other people to do. I don't know what you're gonna do with that, but just contemplate and say, right? So it becomes something that he instructs people, to do after him. And again, it's the station of his rank. And there's a very big difference between maqam, right, and which is station, as well as it relates to title. There are many people that will not have the title of prophet, right, but who will reach that maqam. This is the case of Hajar. Why are we walking in the footsteps of Hajar during Hajj, right? We do it for Ibrahim, we do it for Rasulullah and Hajar, right? This is again, right, even the station of Maryam. This is about maqam versus title and assignment. And so, again, it's just a very, and don't get me wrong, the Prophet Muhammad, don't get it twisted. He holds the position of Maqam al-Mahmud. And this is what he said about Bilal. I can't say more about it than he said about it himself. Alayhi salatu wasalam.
Ustaza, Jazakallah khair. I want you to sort of explain this because I began to uncover the story of Sayyidina Bilal, radiallahu anhu, in a way that we're often taught that he was amongst all the beautiful things that you've listed today. But what we all know him to be is the caller of prayer, right? And the storyline is oftentimes associated with the voice and all of that, and you dismantle that today.
Mhm.
But he was also, in terms of his status, the minister of finance.
Yes.
And we don't talk about that.
Right, in terms of what
But you
he's
have
given,
this
yeah.
black man holding the mal
Yeah.
of Arabia, trusting him with that. So I want you.
No, you just did it. No, yeah, you just did it. Now go ahead, Professor. No, mashallah, this is good.
Because I think that when it comes to status, and when it comes to, I mean, of course, like there is something so grand in to be the caller of prayer. I mean, to me, that's the status for me. Right?
That's about spiritual rank,
That's the
right?
spiritual rank. But when
This
it
is
comes
about-
to societal,
So what we understand about that is that the narrative that's being told is that if you have an understanding of these people not being trustworthy,
Bismillah.
right? You need to check that, right? If that there's a story about, that blackness is somehow associated with not being able to handle money, or not being able to, not be able to be responsible or strategic, or again, just one that you would give trust to, a trust of that nation, then you need to dismantle that in your mind.
So I'm gonna trust and also
Intellect. That's what I'm saying when we talked about in the beginning, that what we have done with colors and races is that we have assigned a particular intellectual value to them, right? And that we have all played that out. Like, and we see that from an institutional level, right? That blackness means that you are only inclined towards this level. You only have this much intellectual ability, right? And that if you rise above that, then you're one of the few, right? You're one of the, this is a phenomenon to be celebrated, right? As opposed to, you have the same intellectual ability as, you know what I'm saying, as anyone else.
no, and the fact that he was enslaved and this was commodification, this was capitalism, but now look what's going on. Here.
All of this, subhanallah. If we were to look at even this concept of those who are absorbing, right? If we were to look at those who are absorbing the ills of society, you think about black folk, what ill aren't they suffering? What ill aren't they absorbing? Right? You list them, whether it's the idea of being intellectually less, right, as it relates to healthcare in this country. I can speak firsthand as it relates to housing and right, as it relates to that, as it relates to justice and criminal justice, and as it relates to education. Every aspect, they are absorbing literally the lowest part of all of ourselves. They are the recipients of that. But part of that is because if you annihilate that, if you can subdue that power, that self-mastery, then it's easy to create easy to create slavery in multitude of ways. Because if you, again, if we can undo anti-blackness, then dealing with brownness, you know what I mean, all that other stuff will begin to fall. It's the height for us.
Earlier you spoke on how like other forms of racial oppression, like for example, if anti-blackness was dismantled, then other forms of racial oppression would also be solved. So my question is it only racial oppression that would be reliant on anti-blackness, or for example, does Islamophobia also derive from?
Well, there's a huge race element that is a part of Islamophobia. That definitely in itself, you know, has a lot to do with racial structure and how we're understanding. So, yeah, it has a lot to do with our ability to accept what we consider the other, our ability to accept that which we consider vastly different, greatly different. That will play into it.
So like, and I'm not like too familiar with this, but like Luqman is like a black father in the Quran too.
Yes, that's what I was saying
earlier.
earlier.
A lot about like mothership, but like, you know,
I mentioned Luqman. Did y'all hear me mention Luqman? Yeah, come on now.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Even though, and I will say this, I wanted to talk today about mostly the origin. So in talking about the origin, I had intended, and they'll tell you, I had intended only talking about the origin of blackness today. So that also is why I'm mostly focused on women. But remember, I said this is a series. We're gonna come back. We're gonna talk about some more. We have some more to unpack. Right? We got some more to unpack. Because if we can at least, if we can accept the origin, right? Then if we can accept black motherhood and black womanness, and right, we can begin to, right? It becomes a little bit easier. So today I really wanted to just focus on the origin. But I didn't leave Luqman out, I promise you. We're going to unpack him.
I actually want to build on that for a second. Being a new convert, but understanding I do recognize myself as a black woman because my father's black. He is Sudanese and Puerto Rican. We were dropped on a boat on an island in Puerto Rico. Straight up. I know my history. I know my ancestry. You need to know your origin so you don't go back into history. You need to know the beginning and the basics so you don't repeat the history. You want to know what happened? Start from the beginning. Build your blocks to that, open your knowledge and your wisdom, and then you'll get to today. That's how that starts. So the origin has to be the foundation, otherwise you will not be able to learn anything after that. And your mind will close.
I hear some people upset up in here. I think we need a healing up in here.
We are woke.
Right?
We woke.
Need a healing up in here.
Woke.
Yes, ma'am. Either one. Y'all work it out.
So I'm just thinking that like this talk was really great, and I'm from Kenya, and we don't really have such conversations about how Islam is from Africa, and that we have this sense of ownership towards it. So like I was listening to this talk, and I was just thinking, I wish my father was here to listen to this, just because I tried telling him this, but he thinks that there's a clear divide between who's a slave and who's an original Muslim, and so.
What you say?
It's very messed up. Like, what's your advice on how we could talk to our parents or talk to community members to kind of like break down this divide that they see about how Islam cannot be related to blackness or Africanness, whatever that means, because my father's convinced that he's not African, you know, and that he's not.
He's not African. He's Kenyan.
He's Arab. He's Arab. So that's
Oh.
and so that makes him a better Muslim, or like better connected to Islam in that sense. And so when he sees a black man, it's not like he's not in the same station as he is, and no matter how good of a Muslim he is, like just because he doesn't have that station of being Arab, he's not worthy. So how do you break that down to him, make him understand that like that's not how it is?
Yeah. So this actually has a lot to do with our general, I mean, this is a lesson that has been reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. Like for the most part, like if you're not Arab, then you're a deficient Muslim. right? Like you're coming from but Salman and Farisi, there were so many companions of the Prophet ﷺ that were not Arab. So, to think that, it makes me a better Muslim if I am Arab, that was something that was introduced. And that's colonialization as well. And so one of the main things that I find is that because you're talking about your father, is that, we don't speak to our parents the same way that, we speak when we're like out trying to, be revolutionary in the street. We don't speak to our parents like we're activists. When you come home, you're their child. And so how we communicate that, especially to communicate something like I'm trying to tell you something or I'm trying to teach you something, we speak about it never from the perspective of you're wrong and I'm right, or I have something to school you about. We might say, oh, wow, I found this interesting book. Or I found this really interesting lecture. Or, oh my goodness, Dad, I was at a lecture here and I heard this, and you just talk about what you were in. I just found that really interesting. What do you think about it? Or it may be a perspective where even you're working to organize something outside and you invite them to it, or you invite them to listen. But remember in those situations that you are their child. And I come from strong, proud black family, like parents. So I'm not coming to them like, look. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Like, not if I want to keep my teeth or my life. Right, like, Right, even when I talk to my mama about, for the most part, Mama, you always right. I just had an idea about something I was thinking about. Right, so be gentle with them, right, and find sometimes other people or elders, someone their age, who might be able to communicate that in a non-confrontational setting. So Queen Asiya also, she's like, I want to bring out, let's talk about some more black women. So again, yes, Queen Asiya is also mentioned in the Quran. And subhanAllah, we know that Queen Asiya is the one that when Musa's mother, and we also, even in talking about Musa, the Prophet ﷺ, when he described Musa, he said that he was a very tall, dark-skinned man. He describes Musa as being very dark-skinned, and he says is very specific in saying that he was the color of Adam, right? And so we know, in addition to, we know that was the particular, the color of people who were under that subjugation during that particular pharaoh's time, and there's a lot to be discovered in terms of who that pharaoh was, where he was from, why these particular people were subjugated inside of Egypt at that time, because that wasn't always the case, but why that happened to that particular group. And so Queen Asiya, being an Egyptian woman, and Egypt is where?
Africa.
And so Queen Asiya, then, basically when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspires his mother to put him in, basically to nurse him and then put him in the water, it's actually Queen Asiya who receives him. And actually she's the one who pretty much protects him, right? And is the one who's responsible for returning him back to his mother to nurse, and really the one who raises him and protects him in many cases from Pharaoh. So she plays a huge role. But before we can go to Queen Asiya, we just go to Musa's mama. Right? Right? Who's mentioned, subhanAllah. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّ Musa. Right? Ummi Musa. وَأَوْحَيْنَا. Like Allah says, I revealed to her. Right? Which is a whole nother, discussion about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's relationship with the mother of Musa. This is huge. As we talked about, even for the women's halakha, you brothers weren't there.
We're not invited.
Right? In talking about, that this relationship that the mother of Musa has with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and her level of steadfastness and truthfulness, and that subhanallah that Allah is telling Musa about the conversation he had with his mother, and how this basically this very high rank that he gives her, because he starts off in Surah Al-Qasas talking about that I shall make you the inheritors of the earth, right? Make you from the Warithin, that from your oppression, that I have a and I can say this to you even as we talk about blackness, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says I have that I have a plan for you in this, right? I have a plan for you in this. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala sayyidina Muhammad. All right, y'all, it's 8:30.
Got to stick up.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله سيدنا مولانا محمد. Ya Allah, we ask that you please give us a complete and perfect faith after which there is no disbelief. Ya Rabbi, give us a relationship with you by which we never feel inferior. Ya Rabbi, give us a relationship with you by which we never feel superior to another people. Ya Rabbi, we ask that you please remove the hedges of colonialization from our minds. Ya Rabbi, we ask that you please free us in every way, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, from the ideas of white supremacy. Ya Rabbi, we ask that you make us amongst those who truly believe that there is none that's worthy of worship except for you. Ya Rabbi, and by that, give us the strength and the courage to stand up for truth, to recognize truth when we see it and to follow it, Ya Rabbi, and to recognize falsehood when we see it, Ya Rabbi, and to avoid it. Ya Rabbi, we ask that you please heal us. Heal our minds and our hearts and our communities, Ya Rabbi, from the racism and the colorism, Ya Rabbi, that we have endured and that we propagate, Ya Allah. Ya Rabbi, we ask that you increase us in knowledge, Ya Rabbi, that is of truth, knowledge that is beneficial, Ya Rahman Rahim. Ya Rabbi, we ask that you please heal us with completeness. Give us tawfiq wal afiyah from you. Ya Rabbi, we ask that you please, Ya Muhammad, build a fortress of protection around us and around those, around us from the enemies of you and the enemies of us. And bless us, Ya Rabbi, to come together truly in the spirit of the Muhammadan community, Ya Rahman Rahim. Ya Rabbi, bless us to implement the qualities of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, by which we remove from us all of the diseases and the sicknesses of our hearts, Ya Rahman Rahim. Allah, make us amongst those whom you love, whom you favor, whom you've guided, and whom you've kept firm upon Sirat al-Mustaqim, and whom you grant Jannatul Firdaus al-A'la, Ya Rabbi, by your mercy. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ameen.